Have you ever tried so hard to relax that relaxation turned into another job you could fail at? Have you ever noticed that your mind becomes softer the moment you stop demanding it be soft? Welcome back to the channel. If you click this because your mind feels crowded, heavy, restless, or just tired, let me say this in a steady way that you can lean on. You do not need to force yourself to be okay right now. You do not need to win against your thoughts. Tonight we are going to use stories, the way people have used stories for centuries, not to escape life, but to return to it with a calmer heart. The first idea is that your suffering often multiplies because you cling. You resist, you replay, and you judge yourself for being human. The second idea is that calm is not a prize at the end of perfection. Calm is a direction you practice. And every small return to awareness changes your karma, which means it changes what your life feels like from the inside. So settle in. Let your shoulders drop a little. Let your jaw loosen a little. And let me tell you a string of stories that are simple on the surface and deep underneath. The kind of stories that do not shout, but somehow make the nervous system feel safer. There was once a young traveler who went to a temple because he heard the monks there knew how to relax. He imagined relaxation as a permanent state, like a glowing shield around the mind. He imagined the monks never got irritated, never worried, never felt fear. He imagined they lived inside a smooth, perfect silence. So he arrived with a desperate hope. "Please teach me to be calm." A monk greeted him and asked what he was carrying. The traveler was confused. "Carrying? I only have my bag." The monk smiled and said, "Not the bag. What are you carrying inside?" The traveler opened his mouth and immediately felt his chest tighten, because he understood the question. He was carrying unfinished conversations, regrets, fantasies, anger, shame, and the constant pressure to be someone acceptable. He was carrying the fear that if he stopped pushing, his life would collapse. He was carrying the belief that peace was for other people, not for him. The monk said, "Come, walk with me." They walked through the garden. The traveler kept trying to talk, explain, justify his stress. The monk kept walking slowly. The traveler got annoyed. "Why are you walking so slowly? We are wasting time." The monk stopped and pointed at a small pond. The water was muddy. The monk asked, "How do you make it clear?" The traveler said, "You stir it and remove the dirt." The monk laughed softly. "If you stir it, it becomes more muddy. If you let it settle, it clears by itself." The traveler stared at the pond. The monk said, "That is your mind. You keep stirring it with struggle. Let it settle by stopping the fight for one breath." The traveler tried. One breath, not forcing, just noticing. Thoughts still appeared. He felt disappointed instantly. The monk said, "Do you see how quickly you judge? The judging is more stirring." So the traveler practiced again. Thought appears. He notices it. He returns to breath. He tries not to make a story about failing. He just returns. Nothing dramatic happened, but something small happened that mattered. The tightness in his chest loosened by a few percent, and he realized calm might not be a huge event. Calm might be small returns, repeated, until the mind learns it does not have to keep bracing. The traveler stayed at the temple for several days. On the third day, he watched an old monk sweeping leaves. The old monk swept slowly, like each leaf deserved respect. The traveler asked, "Why do you sweep so slowly?" "The wind will bring more leaves." The old monk said, "Yes, and I will sweep again." The traveler frowned. "That sounds pointless." The old monk said, "You are waiting for life to stop making leaves. Life will not stop. The practice is learning to sweep without resentment." That sentence hit the traveler like a quiet bell, because he had been living as if peace meant no leaves, no problems, no emotions, no uncertainty. He had been waiting for a world that does not exist. The old monk was living in the real world, where leaves fall, where things get messy, where you sweep, and you sweep again. And the heart can still be calm if it stops arguing with reality. That was the first story. Now let me tell you the second one. A woman came to a teacher and said her mind could not relax because she kept worrying about the future. She imagined disasters. She imagined people leaving. She imagined failing. She imagined being embarrassed. She imagined losing what she loved. The teacher listened and asked, "Where is the future?" She said, "It is coming." The teacher asked, "Where is it right now?" She looked confused. "It is not here yet." The teacher nodded. "Then why do you treat it like it is attacking you right now?" She said, "Because it might." The teacher said, "Might is a word that can steal your whole life. Might is endless. Might can create infinite fear. You cannot build peace on might. You build peace on what is real now." The woman protested, "But I need to plan. I need to be responsible." The teacher said, "Planning is not the problem. The problem is rehearsing suffering. Planning is choosing actions from clarity. Rehearsing suffering is torturing yourself from imagination." The teacher asked her to do something simple. For 1 minute, feel your feet. For 1 minute, listen to the farthest sound you can hear. For 1 minute, feel the breath enter and leave. Then notice what happened to the future. She did it. She noticed the future did not disappear, but it lost its grip. The teacher said, "The future becomes heavy when you abandon the present. If you return to the present often, the future becomes something you can meet when it arrives, not something that devours you before it exists." The woman said, "What if my mind keeps running?" The teacher said, "Then, return again. You do not need to win. You need to return." That was the second story. Here is the third. A young monk complained that another monk was irritating. He said the other monk chewed too loudly, walked too loudly, laughed too loudly, and always seemed to be in the way. The teacher listened and asked, "When did the irritation begin?" The young monk said, "When I saw him." The teacher said, "Are you sure?" The young monk said, "Yes." The teacher asked, "When you are alone, do you ever feel irritated?" The young monk hesitated. "Sometimes," the teacher said. "Then the irritation does not begin with him. It begins in you. He is simply the bell that reveals it." The young monk felt offended. The teacher continued calmly, "If you want peace, do not blame the bell. Listen to what it reveals. Irritation often protects a deeper feeling, like fear, sadness, or exhaustion. When you are tired, small noises feel like attacks. When you are afraid, small inconveniences feel intolerable. When you are ashamed, someone else existing freely can trigger you." The young monk said, "So what do I do?" The teacher said, "When irritation rises, located in the body. Is it in the jaw, the chest, the stomach? Breathe into that area. Then ask, what is the deeper need underneath? Rest, boundaries, honesty." The young monk tried. The next time the other monk chewed loudly, he felt irritation rise. He noticed it in the throat. He breathed. He realized he had not slept well. He realized he was hungry. He realized he was also jealous because the other monk seemed carefree while he felt tense. The irritation softened, not because the sound changed, but because he stopped making the sound responsible for his inner state. Later, the young monk apologized to the other monk for his harshness. The other monk laughed and said, "I chew loudly because I cannot hear myself well." The young monk felt humbled. He realized his story about the other monk had been a fantasy. His anger had been based on imagination, not truth. The teacher said, "Do you see how karma is created? A story arises. You believe it. You react. You create suffering. Or a story arises. You notice it. You breathe. You ask questions. You create less suffering. The world remains imperfect. Your heart becomes freer." That was the third story. Here is the fourth. A man carried a heavy sack everywhere and complained constantly about life being exhausting. A teacher asked, "What is in the sack?" The man said, "My responsibilities." The teacher said, "Open it." Inside were not responsibilities. Inside were old grudges, a letter he never sent, an insult he never forgot, a failure he replayed, a comparison he could not stop feeding, a fear of being ordinary, a need to be admired, a desire to control how others saw him. The teacher said, "These are not responsibilities. These are stones." The man said, "But they are mine." The teacher said, "Yes, and you are choosing to carry them." The man asked, "If I drop them, who will I be?" The teacher said, "Someone with hands free to hold what matters now." The man dropped one stone and felt immediate relief. He was shocked by how heavy it had been. Then he dropped another, and another. The sack became lighter. The teacher said, "This is letting go. Not forgetting. Not denying. Not pretending. Simply stopping the habit of gripping what harms you." The man asked, "Will I be weak if I let go?" The teacher said, "No. You will be strong enough to walk without dragging unnecessary suffering behind you." This story relaxes the mind because many of us are dragging stones we do not need to drag. And the mind does not rest because it keeps its hands clenched. So the practice is not complicated. Notice what you grip. Ask why you grip. Then loosen, one finger at a time. That was the fourth story. Here is the fifth. A student asked a teacher, "How can I be peaceful when people treat me unfairly?" The teacher asked, "When someone insults you, what happens inside?" The student said, "I feel heat. I feel anger. I feel the need to defend myself." The teacher asked, "Then who is controlling you? The person or the anger?" The student said, "The anger." The teacher said, "Then the person only threw a spark. You built the fire." The student got angry at that sentence. The teacher smiled. "Do you see? Even now, you build fire quickly." The teacher said, "Fairness is not something you can demand from the world every day. The world is unstable. People are wounded. Mistakes happen. If your peace depends on fairness, your peace will be rare. But if your peace depends on wisdom, your peace becomes available even inside unfairness." The student asked, "What wisdom?" The teacher said, "The wisdom of choosing your next action instead of obeying your first reaction." Then the teacher told him to practice this. When someone insults you, take one breath and ask, "What is the most skillful response?" Sometimes it is silence. Sometimes it is a boundary. Sometimes it is walking away. Sometimes it is speaking calmly. It is rarely exploding. The student practiced for weeks. At first he failed. He reacted. He regretted. He felt shame. The teacher told him, "Do not turn failure into identity. Failure is information." Eventually the student experienced a moment where an insult landed and he felt the old he tries. He took one breath. In that breath, he saw the other person was afraid, trying to look powerful. He answered calmly. The insult lost force. The student walked away feeling lighter. The teacher said, "Do you feel it? You just broke a karmic chain." The chain was insult to anger to harm to regret. You inserted awareness. Awareness changed the whole outcome. That was the fifth story. Here is the sixth. A monk was crossing a river with another monk. They saw a woman on the bank, unable to cross. The first monk picked her up and carried her across. Then he put her down and continued walking. The second monk stayed silent at first. Then after an hour he burst out, "How could you touch a woman? That is against our rules." The first monk looked surprised. "I put her down an hour ago. Why are you still carrying her?" The second monk froze. The first monk said, "You did not carry her in your arms. You carried her in your mind. That is why you are suffering. You cling to an image of purity and use it to punish yourself and others. True purity is not obsession with rules. True purity is a clean heart that helps when help is needed." Then let's go. This story relaxes the mind because it reveals how often we suffer not because of what happened, but because we keep carrying what happened long after it is over. We keep carrying the argument. We keep carrying the embarrassment. We keep carrying the regret. We keep carrying the fear. We keep carrying the need to be right. And the practice is learning to put it down. That was the 6th story. Here is the 7th. A person went to a teacher and said, "I meditate every day, but my mind is still messy." The teacher asked, "How do you meditate?" The person said, "I sit and try to stop thinking." The teacher nodded. "That is why you suffer. You are meditating like you are fighting your mind." The person said, "But the goal is to have no thoughts." The teacher said, "The goal is not no thoughts. The goal is no attachment. Thoughts will come like clouds. You are not required to chase every cloud or punch every cloud." The teacher asked the person to do a different practice. Sit and allow thoughts. Each time you notice you are inside a thought, label it thinking and return to breath. Do not judge. Do not celebrate. Just return. The person practiced and felt frustrated. Thoughts kept coming. The teacher said, "You are measuring progress by silence. Measure progress by return. Each return is strength. Each return is awakening." After months, the person reported something surprising. The thoughts still came, but they felt less sticky. The teacher said, "Yes, that is the mind learning to settle." A pond does not clear by being commanded. A pond clears by not being stirred. This story relaxes the mind because it removes the pressure to perform. It replaces the demand to be empty with the permission to be present. That was the 7th story. Here is the 8th. A king asked a monk, "What is the secret to happiness?" The monk said, "Everything changes." The king was confused and angry. "That sounds depressing." The monk said, "It depends on how you hear it. If you cling to pleasure, change is scary. If you cling to pain, change is hopeful. Impermanence is not a threat. It is reality. When you accept it, you stop squeezing life. When you stop squeezing, you suffer less." The king said, "But I want stability." The monk said, "You can have inner stability, not outer guarantee. Outer life will change. Inner stability is built by learning to meet change without clinging and without hatred." The king asked how. The monk said, "Practice gratitude without attachment. Enjoy good moments without demanding they last. Meet hard moments without believing they define you. That is wisdom." The king practiced and found he could enjoy his palace without being owned by it. He could face threats without collapsing. He could meet praise without swelling. He could meet criticism without rage. Not perfect, but steadier. This story relaxes the mind because the mind often suffers by demanding permanence in a world built on change. When you stop demanding permanence, your heart stops bracing as much. That was the 8th story. Here is the 9th. A student asked a teacher, "How do I trust life when I do not know what will happen?" The teacher asked, "When you walk, do you know the exact shape of the next step?" The student said, "No, but I step anyway." The teacher said, "That is trust." The student said, "But big things feel different." The teacher said, "Big things are made of small steps." The mind gets overwhelmed because it tries to swallow the whole future at once. Trust is not believing nothing bad will happen. Trust is believing you can meet what happened with awareness and compassion. The student said, "What if I fail?" The teacher said, "Then you learn. Failure is not a curse. Failure is a teacher. The only real failure is refusing to learn." The student practiced taking one wise step at a time. When anxiety rose, he returned to breath. When fear demanded certainty, he reminded himself, "I only need the next step." Over time, his mind relaxed because it stopped trying to hold the whole sky. This story relaxes the mind because it returns you to something workable. The next step, the next breath, the next kind action, not the entire future. That was the 9th story. Here is the 10th. A person asked a teacher, "How do I love others without getting hurt?" The teacher said, "You will get hurt sometimes." The person was shocked. That is not comforting. The teacher said, "It is honest. Love in an impermanent world includes loss and misunderstanding. The goal is not to avoid pain. The goal is to avoid becoming bitter. Bitterness is optional. Compassion is a choice." The person asked, "How do I avoid bitterness?" The teacher said, "By loving with wisdom." Wisdom means boundaries. Wisdom means not clinging. Wisdom means not making someone else responsible for your worth. Wisdom means giving without keeping score. Wisdom means forgiving without becoming a doormat. The person practiced. When they helped cleanly. When they needed rest, they rested without guilt. When someone disappointed them, they allowed sadness, then released the story that the disappointment meant they were worthless. When someone left, they grieved, then remembered impermanence. They learned to love without turning love into a cage. This story relaxes the mind because many people feel tense not only from stress, but from emotional gripping. They grip relationships. They grip outcome. They grip approval. When you learn to love with wisdom, the grip loosens, and the heart breathes. Now, those are 10 stories, but I want you to notice something. They are not really 10 different teachings. They are the same teaching wearing different clothes. Stop stirring the mind. Stop carrying what is over. Stop gripping what changes. Stop obeying every thought. Stop demanding certainty. Stop turning emotions into identity. Stop punishing yourself for being human. And then, practice returning. Return to breath. Return to the body. Return to what is real now. Return to compassion. Return to the next wise step. This is the path that relaxes the mind, not as a performance, but as a daily way of living. Let me stay with you a little longer here, because when people feel stressed, they often want a technique, but what they need most is a shift in how they treat themselves. If your mind is busy right now, do not make it a moral failure. A busy mind is often a sign of a nervous system that does not feel safe. Safety does not come from shouting at yourself to calm down. Safety comes from gentleness and repetition. One breath, fully noticed. One thought, gently labeled thinking. One return, without judgment. One kind sentence, simple and true. This is hard, and I can take one step. Do it again later, and again. This is how karma shifts. Not through grand vows you forget, but through small returns you repeat. A lot of people ask, how long does it take? The mind loves that question because it wants certainty. But calm is not a finish line. Calm is a practice you can do today. The question is not how long. The question is, will you return once more when you notice you are lost? Because every return trains the mind that it does not have to panic to survive. And when the mind stops panicking so much, your life starts changing in quiet ways. You speak more gently. You listen better. You make fewer impulsive choices. You sleep a little deeper. You apologize faster. You forgive more easily. You stop carrying stone. This is what inner peace looks like. It is not an image. It is a pattern. Now I want to share a personal style reflection that often helps people feel less alone. Many of us think our stress is unique, like we are the only one failing to manage life. But if you could hear the private thoughts of the people around you, you would realize how many are carrying invisible weight. Some carry fear of failing. Some carry grief. Some carry shame. Some carry loneliness. Some carry pressure to perform. Many are smiling while their minds are loud. That is why compassion matters. Compassion is not only a spiritual idea. Compassion is social medicine. When you are gentler with yourself, you become gentler with others. When you become gentler with others, the world becomes slightly safer. And when the world feels safer, minds relax more easily. This is how kindness becomes a force that shapes destiny. So if you are feeling tense right now, let one small truth land. You do not have to solve your whole life tonight. You only have to stop stirring the mind for one breath. That one breath is not small. It is the door. Now I want to hear from you. Which part of your mind feels heaviest lately? Is it worry about the future? Regret about the past? Fear of being judged? Anger at someone? Loneliness? Or exhaustion? Share what you are carrying in the comments. And if one of these stories reminded you of something in your own life, share that too. You never know who might feel less alone because you spoke honestly. If you want more long-form storytelling like this, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment to support the community. And if you want to support the channel in a deeper way, consider joining the membership so we can keep making content that helps people breathe, soften, and wake up inside ordinary life. Until next time, let the leaves fall, let the pond settle, let the thoughts pass, and remember, peace is not a place you arrive. Peace is the way you stop fighting yourself and start returning, one steady breath at a time.